Business Buying Banter meets no BS reality. Get ready to dive into the world of buying and selling businesses without the fluff and fancy jargon. Whether you're a seasoned business buying pro or a curious aspiring entrepreneur, this is where the real talk happens. Because in business, there's no room for sugarcoating. Let's get down to the brass tacks.
Oh, there she is.
Woo, woo, yeah. Guess what? We're heading into summer.
Well, I'm in Florida. It's always summer.
Ah.
It's just, is it summer or is it summer to the power of 10?
Right? That's right. You don't get as excited for summer as I do in the Midwest. In Milwaukee,
No.
we're looking forward to these days.
No, I missed that. I actually, when I was living up north in the period when I was commuting to Connecticut for a couple of years back, every week, I actually loved the change from winter to spring because it was like you got up one day and on the way home from work, all of a sudden the trees were blooming. It was great. And as a kid growing up in Montreal, I couldn't wait for the day when the snow was off the sidewalks a little bit and we could wear your sneakers to school.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Or as we used to call them in Canada, running shoes. But yes.
Running shoes.
Running shoes.
We keep the HVAC companies busy in Wisconsin because we're turning on the heat and the air sometimes in the same day.
No heat for me.
Oh.
I've had my heat on since I lived here. I'm here 28 years. I think I've turned on the heat 4 times and it stinks, right? Because it never gets used. So it's, no. So I moved here specifically not to turn on the heat.
Oh, man. But I know my best friend lived down in the Sarasota area and they don't have heat. And when it got cold, their cold is like 45 degrees. We're in shorts and 45 degrees.
Oh, yeah. Me, it's below 70. I put on a cardigan. But we have a fireplace in the house. I don't know the purpose of that, but if it gets really cold, you can put it on and that can throw enough heat. So it's, it's good to go. Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad it's spring and you have fun stuff going on in your family life. So that's all exciting and looking forward to today, as always.
Me too. This is a great topic today. And for everyone watching us live, thanks for being with us. We really appreciate your support. If you can't make a future episode, be sure to visit our YouTube channel, Business Buying Banter, no BS. Subscribe, like. That support means a lot to us because when you support us, you're helping us support sellers and buyers of small businesses and micro middle ones too. You know, the lower middle market ones, right, Richard?
Yep.
And the more we support each other, the better we can get the message out about the opportunities in this great space of acquiring businesses. And
that is correct.
You had a group last night, I believe, on a webinar.
Oh yeah, terrific group. We were we typically have done them during the day and then had a number of people say it's, hard for them during the day, and we always get good attendance. And last night we did it actually last night at 7:00 Eastern time. We were packed and we covered business brokers and assembling your professional team, specifically accountants and attorneys, and what to look for and what you need them for specifically and how to find them. And also with business brokers, their role, how they can help you, how they can hurt you, and got a lot of great feedback. So yeah, I love doing those. I've got to change the format a little bit. We always look for feedback and we always do a robust Q&A, but I think going forward, we're going to, maybe it was Joel Valdez who actually had a great suggestion, maybe mixing in the Q&A amongst the webinar topics, because for me, it was funny because in his comment, he said something, it'll give Richard a break, and Sia helps in the background. I could talk about this stuff all day long. So I don't need a break. I love this. This is like, there's no business topic more enjoyable to me, but he actually has some great suggestions. So we're going to incorporate them, but it was a terrific session. I got a bunch of emails after with some wonderful feedback. So
right.
Thank you for asking. We missed you. I know you had a family event, so we missed you and see you in the next one.
Well, as they say, family first. And
always.
That's right. And a lot of small business owners today, the baby boomers didn't do a good job with family first. Let's be honest about that. They were
a lot of them didn't
in the business, but our new aspiring buyers out there today, they're looking for those businesses where they don't have to be in it 24/7 to spend time with family. So that's what we're after, right, Richard?
Yes, indeed.
All right, let's get to the topic. Our topic today, mistakes that business buyers make before the letter of intent. And I think about this, sometimes I've heard buyers, what's the big deal of a letter of intent? They'll say that to me. What's the big deal? I remember once, Richard, a buyer that had me looking for funding was in an LOI, but it was on a piece of paper, I think a spiral notebook, and they did not have any. What's the word I'm looking for? Where the seller and the broker couldn't shop the deal elsewhere.
No shop agreement.
Thank you. That wasn't in there,
You
and
pay me
we.
the bucks, Deb.
Mhm. What was that?
That's why you pay me the big bucks, Deb.
That's right. Thank you. I just couldn't remember the name. But that was not in the spiral notebook letter of intent. And we put in, the buyer and I, a lot of time into that deal, and we were moving it along where we felt confident we were going to get bank approval. And the seller and the broker got a cash buyer, and that's where
Yep.
it went. Poof.
End the story. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe share with our listeners the importance of that. Would you? What are your thoughts?
Sure. So the one big thing, when we talk about mistakes buyers make, is you have to get used to making offers. The biggest mistake they make is they don't use LOIs at all, meaning they don't make enough offers. And and the data proves, to get to buying a business, if you want to do this in 6 months, the numbers are very clear. If you've got to make 4 offers along the way, that's what shakes out. So you have to get used to making offers. LOIs are very good. One thing that buyers, where they make a mistake about in talking about the no shop, is this idea that LOIs are non-binding.
Mm-hmm.
LOIs should be binding upon the seller, meaning that it's advantageous to the buyer, because you put in an LOI. I mean, if you don't do it properly, hell, you might as well write it in your spiral notebook or on a napkin, or not write it at all, because there's a few things you want binding. You want the price and terms to be binding. You want any contingencies, critical contingencies, like making sure they deliver certain financials after a period of time, after the LOI, and the no shop agreement, which takes the business off the market. That's one of the primary reasons to put in an LOI. So it allows you the time to investigate the business, work for a full purchase agreement. So you wanted binding as a buyer. You want the seller bound by certain parts of that LOI.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I heard you mention before you went into the whole description there, that buyers should work on several LOIs, delivering them like 4 at a time. Do you mean like have 4 different listings that they're putting LOIs out there and kind of working them all simultaneously? Or share with us what that looks like.
What that means is it's not 4 at the same time. What it means is, during the process of buying a business, and we know the numbers are dismal of people who start the process and never get to the finish line. Our numbers, and we've dealt with tens of thousands of business buyers over the years, the metrics, or the KPIs, indicate that during the process to buy a business in 6 months, it's typically a 4-month looking process. But during that time, if you don't make the average number of LOIs or offers that are made during that time, in order for the successful buyers, they've made at least 4 different offers.
There we go.
Because very often they fall through, or for whatever reason, but those are what you have to look for, which plays into the first thing I said. You've got to get used to making offers.
Yeah.
You have to get used to making offers. It's so important. The first one's always difficult, gets easier after that, but you got to get into that habit.
I agree. And I would like to add to that, since I'm on the funding side, if anybody's looking for funds with SBA backing, I believe LOI, maybe I'm wrong, but this is just my own personal opinion, an LOI looks stronger when you have a proof of funds letter by your bank or your business acquisition loan consultant indicating you're fully vetted. And sometimes brokers try to vet buyers just based on their cash. If you're doing SBA lending, there's a lot more eligibility and vetting that you have to do to make sure the buyer, number one, wants to do what the SBA requires. And number two, are you going to pass all of the government-backed loan guidelines that buyers need to have? Right. And so
Yes.
once we get that in place, I feel like, the LOI, if the buyer knows what they're heading into, if they have to get SBA backed funding, I feel more confident that my buyer is set, and the seller and the seller's broker should feel more confident that they were fully vetted. I'm not so sure every lender out there or every SBA qualified listing out there that has a bank term sheet is what it says it is. So again, choose your resources wisely.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that is, oftentimes you're not even going to get to the point of being able to submit an LOI if you can't prove your proof of funds.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's some sellers, brokers, it's just not going to happen. And even in the case that, let's say you can produce it, submit an LOI, and they haven't asked for the proof of funds, well, rest assured, when they come back on the LOI, the first counter proposal that they're going to have is going to include language that requests your proof of funds. And so we actually talked about this last night, whether it's getting an SBA pre-qualification or getting a letter, a committed, non-committed letter from your lenders, for your backers, to say, yes, under certain terms and conditions, we are prepared to finance so-and-so for X number of dollars. But if you don't have that in place, it's one of the first things you should do in the entire process. I saw a post on one of these websites that are forms for buyers recently, where they had put in an offer, they're getting some SBA lending. There's a $1.8 million shortfall. And now, after the LOI is accepted, now this individual is going to try to find the $1.8 million. And they've got a 14-day window to provide the proof of funds. Well, I wanted to give them what I'd like to have called him and say, come over here, because I'm going to give you a smack upside your head, you idiot. You should have been doing that before. Like, where are you going to go? If you go find the $1.8 million in 14 days, do me a favor, let me know where you get it.
I agree. Because at 1.8 million, that buyer better have some post-closing liquidity to back up that sale and that loan.
Over and above. Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly. It's being prepared. It's doing this properly, and the funding and having that in advance is exactly to your point. Has to be well thought out and done in advance.
I have often overheard you mentor us and our listeners regarding sellers not wanting to release the tax returns before an LOI, which is fair. Because I'm going to say why, because you taught us this, Richard. Just do the LOI and say, I want to see those tax returns in 3 days. Then you get
you're a perfect student. Exactly. It's like, not sometimes buying a business, you got to pivot. And yes, there's a better way to do it, and saying, well, if you give me the financials now, sometimes they won't even give you detailed P&Ls. If you give me the detailed P&Ls, tax returns, or what I need to make a decision, the LOI that I'm going to submit is going to be more robust, more comprehensive, and more accurate. If I don't have enough information, I'm going to submit an LOI. There's a chance there's going to be retrading or revisions. But if they say, well, we're not giving it to you anyways, so big deal. What are you going to stand on ceremony and not put in an LOI? You want the business, a good business, meet your criteria, put in an LOI. And one of the main contingencies is, within 3 days of your execution of the LOI, you must provide the following. It doesn't have to be the whole due diligence checklist, but at least that, and then you can make your decision.
Yeah, that's right. And I will add, I just looked at a listing this morning, and the P&Ls, of course, do not match the IRS filed tax returns. We have everything, thank God, but sometimes they will only release the P&Ls. And I want our listeners to know, just be cognizant of the fact that only if you're getting an SBA backed loan. Richard helps people with other avenues for financing. But if you're getting a bank-backed SBA loan, the decision based on the cash flow is based on those IRS tax returns. So in your LOI, you want those tax returns within the 3 business days that Richard is recommending. And you want your lender or your consultant to sniff through them immediately. Because if there is not sufficient cash flow to cover your loan project, end of story. We got to go find another business listing.
Correct. And all of this is so intermingled, because you get it from one side. The buyer says, well, I can't make an offer until I have the P&Ls and the tax returns. The seller saying in some cases, well, we're not giving you the P&Ls and the tax returns until you make an offer. And the buyer's thinking, well, why won't they release my tax returns? The seller's saying, well, I need a proof of funds. It all works intertwined. Why is someone going to release all this detailed confidential information to somebody who, by and large, is a complete stranger, without them demonstrating that you have the funds to execute a transaction, whatever those funds look like, SBA loan, other vehicles, etc. But understand, you got to work these situations, because most of the time the requests are reasonable on both sides. Sometimes it can get crazy that they don't want to give you any financials until you put in an LOI, and so you pivot. It's dumb. Sellers taking that position, dumb, dumb, dumb. But you know what? What are you going to do? This old throw the baby out with the bathwater? Put in an LOI. You got to get used to making them anyways, and then you can evaluate. It's non-binding upon the buyer. It doesn't make sense to you. That's it. Tear it up. On next. Go to the next deal.
That's right. And strengthen up your LOI and show them that you mean business and you're prepared. Prepared.
Amen to that.
All right. What else do you have on your list for common mistakes? Give us one.
Use an attorney. I mean, you want to get familiar with LOIs. It's very important. We actually discussed this last night in our webinar, saying certain things of documentation that you're going to execute, non-disclosure agreements, LOIs, asset or definitive purchase agreements. You want to understand those, how they work, what are the key clauses, what is your exposure, where you need protection, because you want to make, you don't want to have to run to your attorney every time you have to execute an NDA, for example. With an LOI, we have a template in the course. People have been using it for years. It's very effective, but as we guide people, say you over and above that, you got to add the contingencies and run it by your attorney. Okay. You never want to sign anything without your attorney giving it a quick blessing. And an LOI is pretty quick for them. And you may be working with an attorney who can provide you with a template LOI that, in the next deal, one doesn't work, you prepare another LOI, and then you just send it to them, and he or she will do a quick review. It's not going to cost you thousands of dollars. A very simple document, a few pages. And so using an attorney is critically important. Don't sign anything without your attorney looking at it, because you may do something dumb and binding yourself to something that you didn't want to. So, a mistake to make, you got to use an attorney. I mean, there's no question. I know LOIs inside out, and I would never sign one without my attorney giving it a second set of eyes.
What are your thoughts about business brokerage firms recommending to the potential business buyer to use their attorney that represents the firm, quote unquote, which they also represent the seller, but use the same attorney? Because that happens. I've seen it. And or use their template, their LOI template. Because a lot of firms will say, use our template for the LOI.
First question, absolutely not. Never, ever, ever, ever. You don't use their in-house attorney. And as a matter of fact, you have to be very leery about any professionals that they recommend, whoever they may be, on the account, as an accountant, an attorney, or even in cases where they say, well, you can only use this lender for an SBA loan. No, you can't. You're the buyer, you decide, and you definitely don't want to use their professional recommendations unless you have no other options and you're in a small town, because the broker is typically going to recommend them because they know those people get the deals to the finish line, irrespective of some things that buyers may need to be protected from. So that's the first thing. So that's a big, big no. And if someone does that, they're the dupa. Yeah. Second point, related to the templates. For the most part, they're probably okay. Meaning you could take that template. It avoids you having an attorney redraft the whole LOI for no reason. So you look at that, you could send it to your attorney for review, making sure you add in your contingencies, your specific contingencies to that. I've done them in plenty of cases where I've used the broker's asset purchase agreement, modified it slightly, because it really was pretty good. It was 80% there, and I can add some contingencies, make a couple of changes, remove a couple of things. I didn't have to, craft or draft an entire new document. But on the first part, no. And the second part, yes, take a look at it. It may make sense. Just customize it for you.
Great. So number 2, you can consider using the listing broker's LOI template, but perhaps you're going to recommend to our listeners, have your attorney review the template.
Absolutely not recommend. Yeah. Insist. Yes. Have them review it. And that's with the addition of your contingencies. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. I agree with you there. And your number 1, the seller side brokerage firm recommending their individuals to work with as the business buyer. I always say, who's going to be the new boss here? Who's going to be the new business owner? Who should be making their own decisions to protect their best interest? You.
Absolutely.
It's good your point. Future. Searchers, business buyers, what do you call them?
Finders.
Thank you. Finders.
I call them everything but searchers, because to me, just the name itself means it's like too closely related to people who just spend way too much time looking and never buy a business. Searchers are individuals that are funded. They have their financing in place. They're a funded search. That's how that name came about. Everyone
Okay.
decided to get fancy and use this jargon and call themselves searchers. Business brokers typically laugh at it. They're not searchers. And I think it's a mindset as well. Like, I'm searching. No. I'm a finder. On our webinar, like, you get penalized if you call yourself a searcher. You are a finder. You know, when I buy business, I bought 14 of them. Someone asked me what I do. I'm not a searcher. I'm a business buyer. Or I'm an investor, or I'm an operator. I'm anything. The last thing I want to be is a searcher.
I believe business brokers would call searchers tire kickers, or maybe some other choice words.
Yeah, it's the evolution of making yourself sound terrific. But yes, tire kickers or waste of timers.
Yeah, waste of timers. I like that. All right. What would be another mistake that buyers make before the LOI? Lack of reserve funds, I put on my list. I think it's important to understand, and maybe it's a little premature because we're not at the purchase agreement yet, but we got to have it in the back of our mind. What will the purchase look like on the sell side, and what will the working capital be? Will it be a stock purchase and there'll be some money left over for the buyer coming in to pay the short-term bills, or is it an asset purchase? Maybe that's a little bit too much pre-LOI. I don't know, but I would want to know, especially if I'm a buyer, what does that working capital piece look like? Because one of the biggest mistakes that buyers make is assume everything is going to be okay, not even talking about working capital. And where they have to be careful, if you're getting funding from a bank, not all banks are created equal when it comes to giving the proposed buyer working capital in their loan project. I work for banks that wouldn't give any. They just wanted the buyer to have the cash or figure it out with the seller. I've worked with banks that will give some. I worked with banks that will make you write out a spreadsheet looking at the most recent year-end P&L of the business listing, at all the expenses, and trying to make assumptions. What do I need for the first 3 to 6 months of working capital? That's important, because if you don't get it right, you're going to be out of business within 90 days.
Oh, absolutely. When I do the exercise for business that I'm acquiring, I make the assumption that the business is going to decline for 25% a month for the first 90 days. And look at that and say, okay, is there enough money coming into the business that's going to be able to cover that decline? And if not, I need X amount to cover that gap, or Y amount that the seller has to leave in as working capital. The net working capital term is also one that it wasn't as popular in lower market businesses. It's become increasingly more popular, where buyers are looking for sellers to leave in working capital.
Mhm.
It doesn't work at the real low end. You get it. It does happen in the larger businesses, but for the point of the exercise, you've got to calculate that, because it's exactly like you said, you'll be out of business before you're in business.
Right. Right on.
You know, and it's like, for me, I've just always been uber conservative, and I take 25% off and say, okay, I'm not going to be able to pay the bills based
Mhm.
on that. And so I need to make sure that I have to put in X amount of dollars, whatever the source of those funds are, my own or the sellers are lifting working capital. But you have to account for that. If you don't, I mean, it's just, all of this stuff is all dovetails on the concept that you buy these businesses for no money down.
Mhm.
Because it's just that same similar thinking. I'm going to get in there for no money and start taking out a paycheck. Well, the other thing where people realize when they start, you hear all these, these people talking about buying distressed businesses. Well, how are you going to pay the bills on day one?
Mhm.
If it's distressed, there's not enough money coming in to pay the bills already.
Mhm.
So that's why it's distressed. Because if it was able to pay the bills, it's called profit.
Right
Okay,
on.
but it doesn't have. So making that consideration, you've got to think about it, and early enough. And it's well before the LOI. It's thinking about this early on in the whole process of you going about buying a business.
Mhm. That's
It's not just going to
exactly.
happen by accident or automatically.
Mhm. And that's so, listening to your answer and me thinking while I'm listening, you're looking at the numbers as what your price is going to be in that LOI. And you have to think about what's that working capital piece going to look like in your loan, if there's going to be a loan, on top of all the SBA guarantee fees, the third party fees, all financed in the loan, less the down payment. can the historical cash flow of the business afford it? And I guess we will get to that if they release the tax returns within
Right.
3 days after the LOI. But
There
something
you
you got
go.
to think about before you're giving, I mean, I don't know, before the number. What do you think about that, Richard?
I think it's separate and apart because the working capital requirements don't impact the valuation. And
Yeah.
so you have to keep that separate. It's just that's a almost like a fundamental of the operations. It's a consideration from your own personal, from the cash perspective or capital that's required, but that's separate and apart from the valuation. Because I think what happens if a buyer looks and said, well, I need X amount of working capital, so I'm going to reduce my offer accordingly, where chances are the valuation is not going to work out to a price that makes sense to the seller. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
personal, that's an operational item, and you're going to recapture that money, right? Through the operations. And
Right.
so you keep those separate and apart. They're two
True.
distinct numbers, and it should not impact the valuation.
It can impact the loan approval though,
Yes. Oh,
especially the
absolutely.
larger businesses that need 200,000-300,000 in working
Or
capital.
more, or
Yes.
more, or more.
Um,
Yeah.
and you can get creative. You still can do the SBA loan, and underwriters, if they're tapped out on what they want to approve for the 7A loan, if we can find another lender providing some kind of working capital in a conventional note or an ABL, depending upon what kind of industry it is, there are options to pull in a secondary source for the working capital.
I have two questions for you. What is
Yeah,
an ABL?
asset-based lending.
Got it. Number
Yeah.
one. That's number two. That's number one. Number two, I had a call today with a client. He asked me a terrific question, which was, and I remember seeing something of this nature, but I told him I wasn't sure. Are there any SBA programs that are geared towards veterans?
This is a very common question. And in all my years doing 7A lending, there aren't any special perks for veterans. You always hear, veteran SBA financing. To the best of my knowledge, I'm in the 7A lane for change of business ownership loan transactions. We love veterans. Banks love financing loans, excuse me, for veterans because they're just disciplined and they're
Right.
go-getters. But there aren't any kickbacks or special deals in the 7A land for veterans. I wish there was. Like there was back during the stimulus. Remember, there were 6 payments were taken care of
Yes.
by the SBA.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be nice if the SBA would consider that for veterans or for minorities, just to kind of lift up spreading the love, so to speak. I've been advocating for that for a long time, Richard. So thanks for that
Sure.
question. Hopefully somebody from the SBA will hear this and stay tuned, but there are none in the 7A program. And I really don't believe there are like in the Express or the
Right.
504. I don't
Drives
think
me bonkers.
it
It drives
drives.
me nuts. It drives me nuts. I mean, and that's a whole other thing, and I'll go on a complete rant. But everyone's raw, raw, raw. Thank you for your service. They have them at these,
Yeah,
sporting events. They get up and they give them standing ovations. But at the most important level possible, they don't take care of the veterans. I think it's all talk. They don't walk the talk, and it's full of crap because they do not take care of them properly. There
I
should
know.
be no. I see some of these organizations like Tunnel to Towers, these other things, but phenomenal organizations doing these great things. I don't understand why the civilian population has to take care of the veterans. The
Right.
people put their lives on the line, have limbs blown off or died as a result.
Yeah.
Like, why? I know this is not part of what we're doing, and maybe I'm an American since 2007, but it's just always really pissed me off. Sorry for my language.
All
That
right.
it's all this lip service. They just don't take care of them properly. Homelessness, suicides, what the
Right.
people have gone through, and they're giving them all these raw things. Take care of the people. It's just like inexcusable. The SBA, with all the amount of money that's been allocated, they should take a significant amount of that portion, make sure it goes to veterans. And if
Thank
the
you.
deal doesn't work out, no personal guarantees, nothing. Give them some
Yeah.
guidance. And if the deal doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You know what? They've earned that.
Let me add some more fuel to that passion.
Good. Really pisses me off.
You know what ticks me off is we'll freaking forgive all the student loans, but
Oh yeah.
we won't help our veterans. I'm sorry, students. I was raised if you're going to take out a loan, you got to pay for it. My
Yeah. Well,
daddy
yeah.
couldn't afford college for me. He didn't take out a loan. He wouldn't. I didn't have the pleasures to go to a university, because it just we live very, very frugal and in an efficiency apartment. But yet we're forgiving student loans left and right and up and down, but we won't help our veterans. So
Yeah, and what does
there's
it teach people? You know, if you take on an obligation, that's why we have a whole population of unaccountable people. If you take on a loan for school, that's your decision and you're required to pay for it. And what about all the people that did pay for it? Okay.
that's right.
So, I mean, it's completely unfair. It's ridiculous. It's all of the wrong life lessons. And then you just, make it a little worse by let's also forgive the loans of the people that are protesting and not even let the kids into school to take their exams. I mean, it's messed up. The good news, I would use another word, but it gets bleeped, and so I won't use that. But you're 100% correct. I mean,
No,
it's the veterans. They're in my experience, and I didn't have this benefit when I first moved to the States because the military and what's required is different in Canada than here. But when I moved here, I thought like, as Canada, like your kids were troubled or couldn't find their way, they went into the military. In the United States, it's not the same. The best did the best go into the military.
yeah.
And so at the beginning, when I first came down here, I was almost a little apprehensive because of, growing up in Canada, it wasn't the same level of individual across the board. There's plenty of fantastic ones in the military per se. My perception was wrong. I mean, I was certainly wrong about it. So I was a little apprehensive. And then I hired a couple of veterans. They were the best employees I ever had. Never mind the level of respect, never late,
Yeah.
worked their butts off,
Right.
always team members,
Yes.
propping other people up, understanding, the bigger picture, understanding being held accountable. And learn from that term, the AAR, the after action report, which would be when a plan that we had in the business didn't go wrong and you brought it up to some. They were used to that because in the military you do these AARs, and the individuals that had employees working for me that were in the military, they were just used to doing it. When something went wrong, they wanted to evaluate it. They weren't afraid of covering their butts or their dupa. They wanted to make sure that the next time they got it right. They were like the best of the absolute best employees that I hired.
And they didn't shift blame. They had
fully accountable, 100%. When things went well, it was the trigger syndrome, right? When things went well, they pointed outwards and shared the success with everybody else. When things went wrong, the thumb was this way and they accepted the blame. It's a totally different mindset. Phenomenal.
Well, this is a great segue to get into who's the dupa, because we could say our government is the dupa in some sense, maybe. Well,
or every. And I'm not an anti-government guy, but it's just there's a few good rants to go down the road.
Oh yeah.
Woo!
All right,
I think I'm taking crazy pills some.
Right on. That was for the U.S. government. Just kidding. Maybe.
No. Okay, you listen. You could be non-committed. I'm saying it
thanks
is
for your passion. No, that was really good. I loved every moment of that. All right, this is time for Who's the Dupa in our Business Buying Banter. Here's my story. In a rush to secure his dream business acquisition, buyer John blindly trusted the seller and listing brokers' verbal assurances that the neighborhood road construction would finish in 60 days. He's looking to buy a business and he sees there's some major road construction down the main road in front of his business. Without making a single follow-up call to the city, John, the buyer, pushed forward with his LOI that turned into an asset purchase agreement, and he closed on his SBA loan within 60 days. The deal got done fast. Turns out, Richard, the road construction project had another 10 months to go before completion. This oversight not only delayed business operations, but severely impacted foot traffic and revenue for the now new owner who just transitioned in. So who's the dupa here?
They all are, but there's a hierarchy. Okay. So the broker and seller, of course, because you that's just plain lying. As long as if they knew otherwise, I mean, then it's plain lying. But it's 100% the buyer, because it was a combination. I was going to say to you, it's just common sense, but then I remembered my trusted partner and cherished friend and late partner, Devin Dalio, who used to say, common sense, just not that common. So it is common sense, but it was so easy to avoid. because all they need to do was to ask a couple questions and understand going into this process. When you go into it with no knowledge, no expertise, and you don't surround yourself with the right information or the right people, you make stupid ass decisions. And that's one of them. So yes, the seller and the broker, had they known that that was the case, yes, they're dupas as well. But at the top of the pyramid, at the top of the list, I was going to say at the pile,
Yeah.
is the buyer, because this was a mistake that was so easy to avoid. And my guess that if he were to talk to 100 people who had never bought a business but have an IQ of more than 12 and told them the situation, 99 of them would have said to him, well, why don't you find that out for sure?
That's right. That's right. And I agree with your answer. At first I thought they're all dupas. They're all idiots, you know, and I'm telling you, this is a true story. I've seen this happen in some deals of mine in underwriting stages. Bank underwriters will confirm what's going on with construction in the area. Trust me, they're checking that. But we're talking about stupid mistakes buyers make before an LOI. That is one of them. That could have been an easy call. And 3 words I like to share with business buyers. 3 words: trust but verify.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. And I have it in our course where we talk about this. And I tell people, anytime you're in a business that relies on location for your traffic, it's not a destination location. Generally, road construction happens every 10 years. So you need to go to the city and find out when was the last road construction, even if there's none planned. And certainly on every major roadway, because for the most part, it's going to happen every 10 years. So you have to think about that. And especially at a retail location, of course.
And what's interesting with this story is the loan funded. So somewhere along the line, I want the listeners to catch on to this. Your bank, you think, is doing the due diligence. Sometimes they don't get it right. Okay.
Yeah, and they're not responsible for doing your due diligence.
Yes. Some will check into that. They do a little bit deeper, but others don't.
But others
we're all
don't.
human. We're all different humans walking a different path of what we know based on experience. But based on my experience, I've gone down this construction kind of tobacco. And now I know to make sure with business buyers that I work with, have you checked? Have you looked online? Have you asked any questions? That's part of due diligence.
Absolutely.
Wow. I always wonder, after that loan funds and the transaction, it's closed, it depends upon the attorney that the buyer engaged. Can they go after the broker and the seller?
Yep, they
Right?
can.
Yeah.
They can. It's very difficult to prove. They have to deem it that it was material, that they knew about it. Then they get to the point, the buyer, they get into he said, she said, and the buyer said, I never told him that. And, the seller that says, I never told him that, or the broker says, so unless it's in writing, I guess starting to get litigious, these things happen all the time, and you can probably go after them, but you can avoid all of this by getting educated and doing it in a good way.
Yeah.
You really can. Do people misrepresent? Yeah, of course they do. But to your point earlier, trust but verify. I go one step deeper. I don't even, you want to have a trusting relationship with the other party, but I don't even use the word trust per se in that situation. I say, listen to everything that they say and validate everything. It's similar in the concept being, you've got to do your homework and you got to do your research and investigation. If not, who's the dupa?
Who's the dupa? Right on. That's a great segue to wrap up our show. I'd like you to share with our listeners, when is your next buyers networking and learning series? Because the information that you provide is, and the Q&A that we always talk about, is the best. We're all learning from one another because we're human. We learn from mistakes, not only that we have made in the past, but others have made. So when is the next show, Richard? When's the next web?
The next show is going to be May 29th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We used to do some of them during the day. We tried one yesterday at night. We got a pretty great showing of people. So the next one's going to be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you go to richardparker.com, again, richardparker.com, the top banner there's a link right there to register. And so we make it real easy.
I love that. And our next show, the Business Buying Banter, is in 2 weeks as well, 2 weeks from today. Same time, same place. And we're going to talk about common mistakes that sellers make before an LOI. And I think we gave away one with the seller not telling the buyer that the road construction is going to be around a while.
Absolutely. Hey, by the way, I see a message from my dear friend Frank Filer, who was, when I went into business brokerage, he trained me. And
Oh,
he's an icon in the industry. He still calls me Richie, not
I
Richard.
love it.
So I see a message, Frank. I don't hear. I got the chills seeing your name and your good looking picture up there in the LinkedIn. So thank you for that, buddy. It's wonderful, wonderful to see you. He's an absolute icon in the business brokerage industry. I mean, just a wonderful, wonderful man.
I love it. And there are good eggs in every basket.
Oh yeah, he really is a good egg
I love it.
in every sense. Love the guy.
Fantastic. And one more QR code I would like Rocky to put up for us is your course, which is reasonably priced. It's like a cost of a cup of coffee a day, I think.
Yeah, pretty much now. Yeah, I think she put up the thing for the special report. But again, if you go to richardparker.com, we have hundreds and hundreds of articles, all free. Past webinars that we've done are there. I've been on 72 podcasts in the last 4 months that people can access, and the course is there under a tab called courses. It's really helpful and instrumental. It's helped a lot of people. So you could lose yourself in the information on the website. So thank you for the plug, Deb. I greatly appreciate it, and I truly appreciate you coming to all the webinars. We had something come up yesterday, and I mentioned poor Deb. Not poor Deb. You had a family event, which was much nicer. Poor us that Deb wasn't with us. So hopefully you'll be able to join next time as well.
I will. I
I appreciate the endorsement.
Yeah. And any listeners out there that are heading to LOI or getting ready and you need funding, feel free to reach out to me and I can give you some direction with what the process looks like for SBA back funding. Richard does a great job as well with other sources of funding. So that's why you need to get connected with him as well. Okay. Any closing thoughts, Richard, my friend?
No, I think this is very important for a lot of people understanding the whole scenario and world and universe around LOIs and the purpose that they serve, and people use them in the right way. The most important thing, besides all the minutia of what should be in there and the binding, whatever, the one message I want to convey to people: you have got to get used to making offers. I mean, it is so critically important for this process. If not, you will be forever a searcher, and you want to be a finder. You've got to get into the habit of making offers.
It's like fishing. You got to put the bait on.
You got to put the bait on, and you got to put it in the water.
There you go. That's what my daddy would tell me.
Yeah.
And if the bait's not working, switch it up.
Switch it up. Amen to that. Wonderful to see you, Deb,
You too,
as
my friend.
always.
Okay.
You're such a wealth of information, and hopefully anyone looking to go down the SBA route, get in touch with Deb, because she's absolutely the best.
And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Ciao.